Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What a wonderful turnout. Thank you all for coming on this somewhat wintry, but at least dry evening. We have an unfortunate event, which happens, of course, in winter. Our keynote speaker, Hélène Dufour, who is a nutritionist with Island Health, unfortunately woke up this morning feeling bloody awful, in my words, and has decided it would be better that she wasn't here. So we do have a kind of a we put together some alternatives. She has, however, been very generous with some fairly technical handouts that I think are quite interesting. Most of you have been to Char's before. You know where the facilities are, emergency exits. We also acknowledge that we're on land that was stolen from the Upachasset and the Sea Shot by Governor Douglas in 1859 for a certain amount of coin from English investors. What else is new? So Hélène was going to make the point that climate change will have unforeseen consequences on the food production and some of the systems that we've taken for granted in the Alberni Valley since the time of the Sea Shot and Upachasset. In particular, sea level changes, increasing acidification, are going to have impacts on the whole of the fish, salmon nutrition and migratory patterns, changes in river temperature, changes in river volumes, and so on. But also, of course, as we saw this spring with a long, cold, wet spring, made it very difficult for some of you vegetable growers. It was quite unexpected, and I'm sure Gary and Louis will be addressing that. And the changes in seasonal the possibilities of seasonal flooding, at the same time summer droughts, in general extreme weather. So as we look forward, it seems quite reasonable to predict that there will be a period of increasing instability, which in turn will add to some of the food insecurity that we already experience. So we have this evening as our first speaker. Not yet. Okay, no, we're not. No, we're still doing technical stuff. Yes. So any questions for the panel will be taken from this mic, which I will vacate in 2 seconds, and I'll start by introducing some of our panelists. To my immediate right is Dave Morton, whom some of you saw a few minutes ago, and next to him is Keith Wytton. Keith and Dave have brought various pieces of show and tell from their garden last summer and previous summers. Both of them have grown beans and quinoa, which, as most of you know, are very healthy protein alternatives, both of which grow in the valley. Next to Keith, I think we'll probably have Stephanie, and then at the far end, Gary and Gary Swann, well known to you all as a long-time organic gardener and holder of the talking stick, and his son Louis, who now does all of the non-tractor grunt work, I'm sure. So in between them will be Stephanie and Candyse is here. Where's Candyse? Oh, yes, okay. Stephanie and Candyse. Stephanie's going to be talking about the food, the newly formed food security group that have morphed from transition towns. And Candyse is going to be exploring the topic in a quick manner of growing in small home gardens, container plots, techniques that might be suitable for apartment patios and so on. So the general look and feel of the evening, I think, will be a I don't think there's much point in breaking into table groups. We've no illusions that we're going to be able to teach people how to garden this evening, but we do hope that Gary and Louis might be able to answer technical vegetable growing questions that you had from your experiences last summer and in the past. We know that Keith and Dave's presentation will be of interest, and we know that Candyse is going to be able to give you some background on the newly formed food security group. So that seems to be that's the general feel, and please don't hesitate to come up and ask questions. Or maybe the fairest way would be that each presenter does their presentation, and then we can cross-examine them and then get on to the next presentation. Now, does that work for everyone? Just of interest, how many here are renting or living in apartments? Not very many. Okay, so that makes it easier. How many of you are, in fact, active gardeners? Yeah, the majority. So we're talking to the converted. All right, so I'm absolutely convinced that there will be, between all of these knowledgeable people, some really tough and insightful questions. We've asked Gary and Louis to channel their inner Brian Minter, and we've asked Keith to be a Quechua-speaking grower from the shores of Lake Titicaca, and Dave is Dave from Cherry Creek. So are we ready yet for yay for where did Stephanie go? And Cheryl, get yourself up here. There's a seat for you. Cheryl, get up here. There's a seat for you. Candyse, where did Stephanie go? There she comes. Okay. Would you like a delay? Okay. Ah, yes. Well, in our garden, the early bird gets the worm. I'm sorry, I hadn't realized that. Well, hi, Louis. I'm very pleased to see how early everyone else is. That's all I can say. So, Island Health also point out that there'll be disease vectors. There'll be sea level rise. So I suppose that means don't garden too low in the high water mark, increasing temperature. So these materials will be on this table here for those who want to take them at the end of the evening. They also have presented some materials defining food security and food insecurity in British Columbia, an interesting package. And in fact, Helene had hoped that by this evening there would have been a revision or an update to some food pricing work that had been done in BC, but it's still not. It still wasn't available for her. There's the climate change document, and then and this appears to be the same thing in more detail. So impacts of climate change, and there is interesting little note at the back of this one that talks about interesting little publication that talks about the reduction of food waste in Canada. There was some work done apparently at household food waste in Guelph, Ontario, and it includes a family food waste reduction cookbook. So all of you can channel your inner loaves and fishes, your can look at ways in which less and less goes out into the green bins for those of you who don't live in Cherry Creek. Okay, so I'm turning it over to Stephanie to introduce the Alberni.
The Alberni Valley Food Security Society. So I just and Char, whenever you're ready to. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Char. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Okay, there we go. Perfect. All right, my name is Stephanie, and I'm with the Alberni Valley Food Security Society, and we're here with the Alberni Climate Action and the Transition Town Society, and hosted, thankfully, by Char. So we welcome you today to come learn more, eating cheaper, and growing more. So we'll just introduce myself. Next slide, please. So, who is the Alberni Valley Food Security Society? We are a food-focused action group that strives to strengthen food security and food sovereignty in the Alberni Valley. So I'm just going to briefly go over a few of our projects and programs. We're always looking to add to it, and we encourage everyone to visit us on Facebook and online, as well as I left some forms here that kind of allow you to pick some areas of interest and give us some feedback. So be sure to check those out. So as I said, we work with a lot of different organizations. A lot of the time we work with the Transition Town Society and Island Health and ACRD and the City of Port Alberni, and we're really grateful for those strong relationships. Yeah. Thanks. All right. So what we'd like to see is a food secure Alberni Valley, which means all people at all times have access to nutritious, safe, personally acceptable and culturally appropriate foods produced in ways that are environmentally sound and socially just. So us as a group, we're always trying to learn more about that, and that's why we have these lovely kind of events and learn from other people and hope to find practical ways to employ this moving forward. So that's just me and my contact information. And like I said, I'm very open to conversations with anybody on their ideas about food security in the Alberni Valley projects. I also love to hear about what's going on in other communities. It's really inspiring to see the unique ways that people are facing these challenges. So here's a list of some of our larger current projects: Food RX Box, Grow Local, the Gleaning Project, and the Dry Creek Community Garden. So this, actually the Food RX Box, we are not currently having a cycle. We're going to be looking for some more funding to continue this great program. Anna Lewis is here, and she is the main coordinator. You can put up your hand, Anna. Yay, and what she does is amazing. She connects local farmers and producers, and we utilize their goods, so it's things that are locally processed or produced in the Alberni Valley. And we have these amazing boxes valued over $100, and they're given to people that are identified as nutritionally insecure. So Island Health and this high school and other community partners find these people, and then we are able to deliver this lovely box of food to them. And we've done cycles where it's once a week for 4 weeks. They get this incredible package of local food. And along with it, there's recipes and instructions. And it's really been amazing to see what's happened with this project. And not only does it help support people who may not have access or even know about some of the great stuff we have, but it also puts a great economic benefit for our local farmers. So this is a great project, and we're really hoping to do another round soon. So you can see there some pictures, and that center picture is an example of some of the contents that are in the Food RX box. So it can be hard to see, but you can see there's St. Jean's Cannery, some great local produce, Hertel's meats. I'm guessing that's either oats or flour from VI Milling in the back. And yeah, that's just one example. I'm sure I'm missing 2/3 of the box, but that's an example. So our next project is Grow Local, and this is a program that spans a lot of different things that we're doing, and everything from food skills workshops that we have currently happening to programs with school gardens, and educational videos. We work with Shaw TV and have programming there that helps teach food skills, and especially things that are applicable to the Alberni Valley. And it's just any sort of umbrella for any sort of project that helps people cultivate their skills for backyard food production or other ways to utilize food here in the Alberni Valley. So here's some examples. So down on the bottom left, that's our Grow Local lead, Candyse. Is she here? She's probably not going to be happy. Oh, there we go. Right, she's going to be presenting later. And so she does so much for us with Grow Local, and you may have seen her on Shaw TV. She also works with the schools, and right now we're a part of a working group to try to get more access to school gardens here locally. And a couple other, there's us filming some of the Grow Local. There's Anna and Heather. Heather's another one of our ACRD liaisons. And there's one of our lucky winners from this past fall fair. He won a local food basket, and he was just so delighted. So that was really a lot of fun. All right, so the next program I'd like to talk about is the Gleaning Project, and this has been happening since 2012, and the Food Security Society hosts this project, and we connect people with properties so that we can all enjoy local harvests of fruit. So typically what happens is we have a sign up that'll open around May to June. People can join the Gleaning Project as a volunteer, and that means that they come to pick, usually it's apples, fruit, but we are hoping to expand into vegetables. We have nuts as well. Or you can join as a property owner, and property owners, some of them, it helps for us to come clean their fruit trees out so that there's not kind of excess fruit for bears. Sometimes they're just not able to reach the fruit, or maybe there's just so much of it because it's a tree they planted 10 years ago thinking they would never be able to get this many apples. So it's a really fun project, and we also are going to be we donate 1/3 of the picks to local food security programs. So sometimes that's the Bread of Life, sometimes or other kind of programs like that. And we're also going to be using it in educational workshops. There's some photos of our gleaning. So as you can see, there's our gleaning leader, Carly, there, the bottom left. And we really encourage you guys to join us. It's fun. It's a great way to get involved in the community, and be sure to check us out and stay tuned to join next season. All right, so this is one of our newer acquired projects, and that's Dry Creek Community Garden. The young professionals of the Alberni Valley started this in 2015, I believe, and they were great stewards of this amazing project, and they partnered with the city to lease the land and created the community gardens. This past year, we've acquired the lease, And now we will be managing the garden. So that includes rental plots, and we've tried to keep it really accessible. So that's $25 for a bed, or an annual fee. We also have communal beds, and we hope to be expanding it as well for some educational opportunities. There's our garden. And so this is one of our past work bees here. And there's Jeanette Cormier, who started the garden in 2015 with the young professionals. And we're very grateful to have her as our garden manager now as well. Great. Okay, so these are some of the events that we have coming up. We've got food skills programming happening through the Doc Plus in the city of Port Alberni. We have winter sessions through January through March. And I encourage you to go to Play in PA, the city's Parks and Rec website, to check those out. There's everything from kombucha brewing to no-knead bread. We've got filleting a salmon, knife skills, cooking a soup with Brad from Starboard Grill. I'm sure oyster masterclass, foraging, worm compost, the list goes on. So there's tons of great food skills courses that we're running, and we've partnered with the Doc Plus, so you can check out that facility and the city. And then we also hope to have a presence at the Island Egg Show with the ACRD. That's on February 3rd and 4th at the Cowichan Exhibition Grounds. And we will also be hosting CD Saturday this February 11th. So this has been going on for quite a few years, and this year we're helping organize that event. It'll be at Echo Center, and you can check it out at Alberni or AV Foods/events. We have a listing of all these different events and contact information as well. So come on down to CD Saturday. We're going to have over a dozen vendors. Blueberries, I think some fruit trees from Denman Island are going to be there, and seed saving circle, kids games. It should be a really good time. And then we're in the planning stages of planning a pruning workshop, and that'll be open to the public probably in early March. We're just kind of figuring out the dates. So we encourage anybody that has a fruit tree to join in and learn how to prune it and get the maximum yield. And then you're going to be so overflowing with apples that you're going to call the gleaning project, right? And then we're going to all come in together. So yeah, we're very busy, very exciting. This is the dormant season, but we still have lots on the go. So again, if you'd like to contact us, our website is avfood.ca. Our general email is info@avfood.ca. And we're on Facebook too at AV Food Society. And we've also made a pledge with Char that we're going to connect all of these events on alberni.ca. So thank you very much for coming and learning about the AV Food Security Society. And now let's get to the good stuff. I can't wait to hear all from all these different presenters. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. There was so much new information there that I didn't know anything about, so I'm very grateful. So we'll break a rule. We'll hold Stephanie's questions. We'll get onto the panel, and then we can come back to AV Food Security. Is that okay? Okay. So Dave and Keith. Yeah. So Dave Morton and Keith Wytton.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I feel like somewhat of a pretender up here next to all of this august company. And then I see Anna out there, and it's a little intimidating. But I can only speak to my own experience with gardening. And Keith or Robert had me down to be speaking primarily about gardening and in terms of creating protein alternatives. And well, so I do grow drying beans and quinoa. Quinoa is an amazing amazingly easy thing to grow. It's related to pigweed, in the amaranth family, and literally you can't do anything wrong. You just put it down in the ground, covered over with a little bit of soil. I plant fairly thickly, so I have to thin probably 4 or 5 times. So I grow every year 2 12-foot rows, 12 to 14-foot rows, which translates to about, in the end, once I've thinned it out enough, to about 20 quinoa plants. So quinoa will, you can see how small a seed is. That will grow a 7-foot plant. That little seed will grow into a 7-foot plant with a huge head of quinoa and all kinds of side shoots. So this is, I mean, when at the end of the fall, this was full, this bag. I had about 4.5 pounds off of 2 12-foot rows of quinoa, 40 plants. So the growing part is easy. The hard part is the harvesting. And Keith is better at that than I am. I do it by hand, and it takes me several days to actually deal with it. So, and then I grow drying beans. I grow about 100 plants. I am in my property. I've had trouble with the bush variety of drying beans, so I found a variety that grows as a vine. It's called Borlotti that I use, and it grows up. So I grow 9 poles of individual plants. So there's usually 9 bean plants around 9 poles, so about 80 to 100 plants. And this bag was full at the end of the fall. So that in terms of protein, I mean, Gail and I, we're flexitarians. We're not vegetarians, so we supplement our diet with other sources. But these 2 bags of product will get us through to the next season. Because we supplement, I don't use quinoa as a protein. I use it as a starch primarily. And then I also grow potatoes. This is actually a seed potato that I got these original potatoes from Gary. The beauty of all of this stuff is that I never have to buy seed again. This stuff all is open pollinated. You can save the seed. So once you've bought your initial seed or acquired it, you never have to spend a cent again. So my focus really with all of this is again, food security and independence. I never buy potatoes. I buy way less meat. What meat I do buy, I buy locally. In terms of nutrition, I don't, in the absence of the fact that our nutritionist isn't here, I'm going to read you out some facts. So in quinoa, in a cup of quinoa, cooked quinoa, there are 8 grams of protein per cup. If you combine that with your dried beans, there's 16 grams of protein per cup. And so a total of possibly 4 grams of fat. If you take a steak, there are 6 to 7 grams of protein per ounce and 3.5 grams of fat per ounce. So you're with 1 cup of quinoa and beans, you have essentially got the equivalent of a 4-ounce steak, which according to the health food guide is going to fit in your palm, which is what you're supposed to be eating. Palm full of protein, fist full of carbo, 2 fists of vegetables. So, the one last thing I'd like to say is, I grow this stuff for my own food security, and out of the potatoes and the quinoa and the beans, in about less than 500 square feet of garden space, I grow enough food to support Gail and I through the whole year. Plus, we save seed, we save potatoes to start for the next year, and I do not buy any more seed, any more potatoes. And so it's not just food security, it's also income security. I could address also I'm just going to read this out quickly about the nutritional values in quinoa. Is very low in the glycemic index, so it's very good for blood sugar control. It's high in magnesium, phosphorus. It's a good source of iron, zinc, potassium, small amounts of B vitamins. Per cup of quinoa is 222 calories, 39 grams of carbohydrate, 4 grams of fat, and 8 grams of protein. So those are, plus it's high in antioxidants. Dried beans, high in potassium, magnesium, iron, zinc, phosphorus, and folate, which is a B vitamin. And a cup of dried beans gives you 74% of your daily value of folate. If you don't know what that promotes red blood cell creation, healthy red blood cell, and it's critical during pregnancy and fetal development. So it is also very low on the glycemic index. Per cup, 240 calories, 16 grams of protein, less than a gram of fat, and 44 grams of carbohydrate. That's probably too much information. I'll pass it to Keith.
Thank you. That's great, Dave. I think Dave and Gail are, kind of on the same path as Bernadette and myself. Gardening or producing food is a many-layered thing. There's all kinds of motivations and reasons. We first came to this area in the late 70s. We lived out the tail end of the hippie days in Bamfield for 10 years. And we were fortunate enough there to garden. We had gardened and attempted to garden in a lot of different places before that. But when you're moving around and you're young and you're renting and you dig up somebody's lawn and then you get evicted or something, or your job changes, or you go to a different school, after a while, you really want a piece of ground. And we're fortunate to be able to do that in Bamfield. So we started experimenting there, would be the late 70s, early 80s. We were growing amaranth and quinoa and, lots of things that were unknown at the time in this area. But in the late 80s, we ended up moving into Port Alberni, and that created a whole bunch of other growing opportunities. After being on the wet coast for 10 years and figuring out how to grow things there, we came into in some ways, a much more suitable climate for warm weather crops, that's for sure, in the summer. Although the thing about Bamfield is you could grow year round pretty well. There were a lot of things that would stand in the garden without protection right through the winter. I remember many of you know Lyle Price, who had the potato farm, and eventually him and his partner got out of the potato business. But I remember having a conversation with Lyle. It would have been in the early 2000s, and I asked Lyle. I said, Lyle, what would it take for the Alberni Valley to be food independent if the trucks stopped coming over the hump with food? And he said it would take 5 years. So it does take time to build a system. He was in a position to know what it takes to bring a piece of land into production, what it takes to build the infrastructure. But it's achievable. That's the thing. It doesn't come really easy. It's not going to happen in the first season. But it speaks to what my motivation is to be involved in growing food. And that is, a lot of us grow gardens for the enjoyment. It supplements our diet. It does have an economic, positive impact on the bottom line. There's a lot of talk about it in the news now. But I think about, what we actually grow. It isn't 100% our diet, we still buy food. But I would like to know what to do when those trucks stop coming over the hill. That is, how to garden, how to survive, how to thrive when gardening really matters. And that's a reason to be active, to be growing, to be competent in growing something that you could rely on. So we've been experimenting. I do it for fun. I do it for curiosity. I do it for the food. I do it for the money. I mean, it's for the economic advantage. So some of the things we do grow quinoa. We've grown it. I think the most production we had one year, we had about 20 pounds of quinoa, and that was from a not very big plot. It was probably 30 by 30. And it was, a really nice supplement. It makes you feel good when you go into the store and you see the quinoa for sale for $6 or $8 a pound. And you've got a whole, stock of it at home, and didn't grow with chemicals. It didn't grow with any pesticides. And it's a good feeling. We started experimenting with dry beans, similar to Dave. We've played around with different varieties. And the other thing that comes to mind, just we were sitting here, I was looking at all these food samples, is that this all comes to us from the indigenous peoples of the Americas. This is, we're going to talk about a tribute to their culture, that we still use this stuff, and it's key to the world diet. So one of my favorite beans is the Nez Perce bean, from the Nez Perce Nation in Oregon, Washington. It's a fairly small bean. It's a bush bean. We grow it in rows. It's productive. And the beans don't take a ton of nutrition in terms of fertilizer and that amendments. We use a Morton organic mix. I don't know if you guys know Morton Mercantile in Victoria. They produce an organic garden mix that we find is quite suitable. The other thing we've done is Salt Spring Island Seeds is a good source for heritage seeds, and they had a heritage mix, like was it 6 different varieties, and I don't even remember the names of them now, but we grew some test plots, and then we did taste tests on those 6, and we chose what we thought were the best 3 in terms of their texture and taste. And then we just threw them all together, and we just grow them, like we take them right out of the jar and grow them in a mixed row. And we could just call it our heritage mix. Then the Romano is more of a pole bean, but it was quite productive. That gets rid of some of the problems. There are some issues around with bush beans, either maturing times or sometimes if uneven ripening, and you get some of them on the ground and they'll mildew and that sort of thing. The other thing we played around with is the heritage corn, and so this is our seed for next year. We had there's 5 different varieties there of different types of heritage corn, and there again we grow them in rows, but when we harvest them, we thresh them out. We don't keep them separate. We just throw them all together, and then we grind our own cornmeal with this mixed heritage corn mix. Dave talked about the threshing and the processing. We played around with a few things. The quinoa is a very small seed, and it is a bit of a challenge to process them. And what we did, one of the things with some of this stuff too, the beans, is the ripening rates. And if you want to have dry beans, to store them, they have to be dry. So if you have uneven ripening when you're harvesting, and you're dependent on the weather, so your beans are growing there in the fall, and you don't want to pick them too soon. You want to actually be a dry bean that'll be a viable seed for next year, and then it'll rain, and so you've got that moisture to deal with. So what we did is I built a big dryer. Basically, it's a big box. It's 2 feet deep and 8 feet high and 4 feet wide. And I went down to the Restore, the heritage, the Habitat for Humanity Restore, and I bought about a dozen 2x4 foot window screens, and then put them in slots in that cabinet. And I just put a dehumidifier in there, the kind of dehumidifier you put in your basement to get rid of unwanted moisture. And it works like a hot dam. So you can have beans that are mature but not really dry enough to thrash, and put them in the dryer, and they all come out crispy, and they'll separate out from the shells. And what I do for that, and I'd also do it with a quinoa, is I just I got a 5-gallon bucket, a metal 5-gallon bucket, and made a plywood lid with a slot in it that I get a drywall mixer in, and then put my 1/2-inch drill on it, and that's my threshing machine. So you just beat them up in there and then run them through a set of screens. So for beans, it's like max min. You get one screen that takes out most of the shells, another screen that drops all the fines, and then you end up with your beans. With the quinoa, it's a similar process, but it's so fine that you have to be careful that you don't lose it. And with all these processes, you can also winnow. And what I do is I just use an air compressor. So, it's technology kind of repurposed. But I put these, say I had threshed out the dry beans. I take my bucket full of threshed material and dump it into my metal wheelbarrow that I've cleaned out really well. And then I just use the air compressor, and you can dial the pressure down on your air compressor so that it blows out the shells and keeps the beans. And you can actually do the same thing with the quinoa. Get rid of most of the dross and really fine stuff. But what we find with the quinoa is, do you guys know what saponin is? It's the covering, the natural sort of, what would you call it, pesticide that the quinoa has. It's very bitter. Birds don't like it. I mean, at least that's what they say, evolutionary, is why that quinoa has such a bitter covering. And you can't really, you have to get that off before you eat it. Otherwise you get this very bitter taste. So one of the ways to do that is you can put it in a blender. You put it in a blender, you put, say, in a normal size blender, you put a cup of quinoa, or quinoa that I have, it's still got a little bit of dross and fines in it. Put a cup of that in the blender and fill up the blender, and then you pulse blend it for about a minute. And the quinoa seeds are so fine and so light that the blades of the blender don't actually chop it up. They just beat that quinoa or the saponin off. And then all that little fine dross kind of floats to the surface too. And you get rid of that. And then you have to do that a few times with the quinoa to get rid of the saponin. Usually it takes about 3 cycles with the blender to get rid of the saponin. So that's a little trick you might find if you are successful getting enough to process. And Dave's right about it being very easy to grow. In fact, most of this stuff is easy to grow. That's how it sustained, populations for millennia. It wasn't really fussy. You got to give it a chance. Most people who garden kind of know the basics, what a plant needs to not die. And this stuff wants to make seed. That's what it's built for. And yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to say tonight. I'd really like to have any questions or comments that either Dave and I, what we were talking about. So go ahead if you have any comments or questions. That'd be great.
Any comments or questions?
Or just being dried as in you're using the seed. Like, you still eat them.
Oh yeah, we eat them. And what we found with these, if you grow a bean and then harvest it dried and then store it, you go down and you get your beans and you soak them overnight, or I mean they cook really fast compared to the beans you buy in the store. I think most of the beans you buy in the store are probably like 5 years old. They just get so dry and so impossible to cook. It's a challenge even without a pressure cooker to cook them.
So another thing that I've learned, so I agree with Keith about store-bought dried beans versus what you've grown. I mean, they soften up so much more quickly. But one of the other things I learned is if you when you're boiling in the water, if you add a teaspoon of baking soda, it smooths everything out. It gets rid of a lot of the flatulence that beans cause. So just a little tip.
Yeah, Jackie.
And what I think is really fall. They may have their beads basically ready, but some of them are not quite ready to dry. And so what I do is I just shove them. So I sometimes look at really, really dry, and the ones that are the big pod to save the seed. And to eat later, but the ones that are not quite ready yet, I freeze them. And then we break.
Oh, yeah.
We eat them first, the ones out of the freezer. And you don't have to sit them overnight. They still have a
Yeah.
So they're really quite quick to make your meal. You might have to cook them for about half an hour. And every bit is nice as the dry ones are, you have to soak the night before and then cook a couple of hours. So it really is a good way to harvest once and then separate out your seeds that are the driest from the biggest pods. They're what you save for seed next year. So you eventually breed after a few years. You breed seeds that have more pods that have more seed per pod. Ones that mature more quickly because you're always taking the driest seed from the biggest pods, say for next year, and then you make the other ones on your street.
Very Darwinian. Did everyone get that comment? Yes. Any others?
I just wanted to add a comment about quinoa. So this past year was an amazing year for growing quinoa because of the long fall we had. Typically, I have found it's a struggle in September when the rains usually come, is just when your quinoa is just coming ready to harvest. And you have to be very careful. I've found quinoa germinating on the plant because of the fall rains. You know, it's always a touch and go between having your plant mature enough and the weather. Especially, you typically when years past we'd have the fall fair and it would pour. Well, that's just when you want to be bringing your quinoa in and hanging it to dry. And if you don't do it soon enough, it's going to be germinating on the plant.
Have either of you had trouble with cross-pollination with others in the phylum?
We haven't found it to be a problem. I think our seed is pretty mixed up. Like some of the seed we bought were already mixes of varieties. So, and then there's also what happens, as Jackie was saying, the natural adaptation over time. If you pick your best looking plant, best looking seed to use as seed. But we haven't had a problem with the pollination.
Right. So both of our Quechua friends here are available on the Alberni Climate Action Facebook page or through our email address for those of you venturing into this territory in the future. So, Cheryl, what have we left for you to? Why do I keep Candyse? I know it starts with C. I'm nearly 76. I can't remember things.
I'm hot on your heels.
Okay, Cheryl, where you go.
And once again, we'll try Candyse this time, okay? Short and sweet, because I guess nobody here has concerns about not having any areas to grow in. I always had a postage stamp for a garden, and that was everything that I could. My first garden, okay, you guys, was that big. I'm not kidding. It was just a little tiny, and they had it lovely with little landscape ties, the whole bit, and that's where I got to grow my stuff. So I just got a great big plastic bucket and I threw the ornamental corn in it, and everybody looked at me crazy, and it shot up, and we had cobs, and all the kids in the neighborhood were so excited. And that kind of got me started on it. And then I ended up working for a garden center, and I taught the kid programs. So again, I had to come up with things that were portable and easy for kids to grow. And then they turned it into a program for the seniors' homes. And from there, it went on to community centers for people that just rented or lived in apartments with balconies. And what can you grow and how can you grow? And we've always told them, you grow what you like and you grow what's expensive. So that way, if you've got just a little pot or a soil bag or an ice cream container, if you've got an ice cream container, you can grow a tumbler tomato in it. Or you've got hanging baskets. You can grow beans on your balcony and they'll grow up. You can do the same thing with cucumbers and the like. People get concerned that they don't have enough money for containers. They don't want to go out and buy a whole bunch. Well, at EJ Dunn, we just got them what were they, about 10-gallon pots? I think that's what they were. But the kids grew their herbs and they grew their vegetables in those. And then the garden soil that we put in those pots, we saved the bags and they put the straw, and that's what they grew their potatoes in. So it didn't cost them a whole lot. They had a lot of fun doing it. If you are trying to encourage somebody to grow stuff and they are using containers and they are renting, tell them to lift the plots up off the patio or off the deck. It just needs to be a popsicle stick thickness off. And then they don't have to worry about moisture and mildew underneath and staining and getting charged for that for their damage deposit. It happens. It's true. It's a really good way of getting kids involved. One of my most successful pots that I used for a demonstration this year was we grew an indeterminate tomato. You know, the big black flower pots, you can get the plastic ones. They're not very expensive, or your kid's old toy bin or whatever. But we'd put in an indeterminate tomato, and I believe I've never grown this one before. It was a gift, and it was called a silver fir, and it was from Edmonton. So I've never seen it before. It was a lovely tomato, but we grew the tomato in the center, and then in the beginning of the season, we grew radishes and pansies on the outside perimeter, and we had what did I put in the middle? I can't remember. But radishes and pansies on the outside perimeter, lettuce in the middle. And then when it was time, we put the tomato in the center and put bush beans all the way around. And it worked out really good, and some marigolds. So we had lots and lots of color. When the beans were done, I just transplanted some of the grocery store basil in there, and that just kind of perked everything up too. But you can grow a whole lot in one container that doesn't take up a lot of room. If somebody's downsizing, or if you've got kids that are moving out and times are tough, money's scarce, and if you don't want them to lose their ability to garden, just show them what they can do on a balcony. You can use old straw bales. You can use spoiled hay. You can go out and buy a bag of soil and cut off the top. Stick your seeds in there. You can grow all your lettuce. You don't even need a pot. Just open up a bag of dirt, you guys. Throw your seeds in. And one thing I have to say, those Berlotti beans are awesome. They're creamy. They're just lovely, you guys. I don't know if I need to say a whole lot more on this, just because there isn't a whole lot of need in this group, I don't think. But if anybody's got any questions.
I should point out that Candyse, in fact, is a community treasure. She has 41 different episodes of her growing on YouTube. And it is available, it's on YouTube under Grow Alberni, but it's also linked on the AV Food website as well. And while we didn't promise to teach people how to garden tonight, I'm sure that there's more than enough information for all of you on those 41 episodes, which are local, which take into account our climate and our reality of the valley. So thank you very much, Candyse. So Gary is well known to all of you. His apprentice, not so much perhaps, but we know who does the real hard work, because we also have Jackie in the audience. And so between the three of them, they have stuck with truck farming, market gardening, call it what you will, in this community for how long, Gary? Since 1974. And if that's not stickability, I should also point out that the property, beautiful, sunny as it is not exactly Somas River Flat. So their presence at the farmers market for all these years with the tons of produce that they've produced for all of us is a singular achievement. I'd like to welcome both of them here tonight.
Right. So what do I have to do? Is it people can hear us?
Yeah.
Thank you
So
kindly.
you can hear me? That's good, because I got an ear that doesn't work, so. Well, what I would say first is that the most important thing you can do for your health and the health of the planet is to eat locally grown food. And the closer you can do it to your house, the better that is going to be. Somehow, for some reason, we still think that we can, well, I guess the idea of bringing stuff from California is kind of getting out of it, isn't it? Hasn't it all burnt up now? So it's going to be tough. So, but really, find a way to eat more food, and the best place is yourself. Now, we're a biodynamic farm, and biodynamic agriculture was enumerated by a fellow by the name of Rudolf Steiner. In about the 1850s, scientists around the world have sort of separated chemicals. So they were separating this and this, and we made this chemical and that chemical. And eventually, some of them chemicals got into your food system. And so that was 1850. And then 70 years or so after that, farmers were getting concerned about some of their livestock dying. Things are not growing so well and stuff like that. And it was basically because you had chemicals in your food. And the real thing how things actually grow is that there's a thing called humus, which is central to gardens, central to soil, and it's made by microorganisms and worms and stuff like that, and not chemicals. And so what biodynamic farming, Steiner was asked to come in by the farmers of his day, and he gave a, 6 or 8 time lecture about what to do. So basically what you're trying to do is to refurbish or keep enliven the soil and put humus into the soil. So he enumerated a lot of ways to get that to happen. This little tub we've got here is got something that Steiner called barrel compost. So Louis, can you tell us how you make it? And it's our intention to give, we bought a bag, and I've got it's our intention to give you each a cup to take home with you to start putting biodynamics into your growing situation. So Louis, how do you make barrel
Well,
compost?
first of all, Rudolf Steiner was very concerned with intention. Your intention is everything in all you do in your life. So he wanted people to get back more into that. And he, they say, was actually able to communicate with the group soul of Mother Earth to ask her what she needed to remedy this. And he came up with this barrel compost, which also he has 6 compost preparations, which are different medicinal herbs. And as we're talking food security, a lot of them should be planted in your garden if you can. First one is stinging nettle. If you don't have stinging nettle, get it, grow it. It is such a good plant and so good for you that they say if it wasn't stinging, it would have never survived in nature because animals would have grazed it to death. But because it's stinging, you can then cook it and eat it or dry it and eat it and those sort of things. Others of the preparations was a plant called yarrow. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know about yarrow, but yarrow, especially nowadays as we're thinking about medicine, what is medicine? I mean, yarrow is such a strong antimicrobial, antiviral herb, good for colds, flus, UTIs, all kind of stuff like that. It was actually found in the buried remains of a Neanderthal man 60,000 years ago in Iraq. He had this medicine with him. And everywhere where it grows, indigenous cultures have used it and used it before. Actually, the name yarrow means spear heel. It was the kind of thing like if you got stabbed by a spear, you could pack your wound with the yarrow and it would stop you from, getting sick. It would stop you from dying because it would suture the wound back together, but it would also stop you from getting infected and stuff like that. And in the barrel compost, there is yarrow, there is chamomile, one of the compost preparations, and people know chamomile for the stomach stuff and all that sort of stuff. Stinging nettle, oak bark, which is a very strong, astringent herb, they say, very high in calcium and those sort of things. So, and also dandelion. A lot of people think, dandelion is the biggest herbicided plant in the world, but also the most beneficial to us. Dandelion greens are one of those things for survival. They say back in the day, before people went to battle, they would eat the dandelion flowers before they went to fight in the field, because if you chew a dandelion long enough, the starches change to sugar, and then you get the vitality from it, so you can go and kill your opponent, I suppose. But it was part of it. And a lot, when we're talking more about how can we survive, it is harnessing medicines and harnessing, stinging nettle and growing these other herbs. Like a lot of people, I don't know if people know a lot about comfrey, but comfrey is one of the most fantastic compost plants ever. It grows great, and you can make beautiful compost with it along with stinging nettle, make a fine compost. But also it was called bone knit back in the day. I know when I've twisted my ankle, I've taken the comfrey root, made a poultice out of it, and I've saved myself many a times from, where I thought I had to go to the doctor just by applying the poultice to it. So, biodynamics was more about trying to heal the earth and heal ourselves through the medicine, but the barrel compost really has the ability to bring the compost preparations out in your land, has a real ability to help decay organic matter, to turn it into something that can be plant protein. And yeah.
Well, I'm going to let you do more and wind you up again, but we do make barrel compost and just biodynamic compost on our farm. And I think Louis, and it's usually done on Sundays because we're busy other times. And it usually takes 2 to 3 hours. And the more people we get, the less time it takes. But so, for us, a compost pile would be probably, what do you think, 4 or 5 of those tables.
Yeah,
Would
yeah,
be about
put together, yeah.
Yeah. And so then that gets spread around in all our gardens. So what was I going to ask you to do that?
Well, we are planning to make a biodynamic compost pile on February 19th, providing the weather's good. We have enough material added and we can give people a little bit more of an in-depth overview of biodynamics and what we do on our farm and those sort of things. But also, the most important thing of doing gardening is to try and be biodiverse. Try to grow as many different crops as you can. On our farm, we've planted nut trees. We have a heritage orchard. We have raspberries, cane fruits. And the real thing is to try and almost mimic nature, because the more biodiverse you have, the less problems you have with bugs coming and destroying all your blueberries or this or that, because you have all kinds of different things. And also, if one thing ain't so great, other things usually balance stuff out. So you're never left that you planted 1,000 radishes and the bugs got them all and now you got nothing.
Anything more, Louis? Keep going.
Oh, well, I guess Steiner, and there was a fellow named Alan Chadwick who was a pupil of Steiner who really did the mechanics of doing this growing back in 72 in California, taught all the hippies to grow food. And his philosophy was to really embrace, get your hands in the dirt, try and, you know, especially nowadays where we're so distracted. His was always to take time to smell the roses, you know, watch the creation of life and the creation of stuff. When you think about it, all the vegetables that we currently have now, we really created because they were willing to work with us. We made the apples. We did this as an evolutionary thing with us as well. Along, you know, like you say, the amaranth, it went with the Incas and they developed it, and the beans and the corn, all that stuff. We took stuff like Queen Anne's lace, if you know the wild carrot. We turned that into carrots, or we're able to magically do that. So we are, I guess, stewards of the earth. The earth wants to work with us. As much as we can help it, we have to do, because it is our duty. Well, if we want to survive, it's got to be our duty. We sort of have to. And also, biodynamics was big on realizing that the earth is Mother Earth, and also we're dealing with the cosmos. And a lot of biodynamics is to do with the phases of the moon and the phases of the sun, and that translates into how stuff grows. There was a lady named Maria Toon, very good biodynamic person. She did her life's research. Basically, she planted radishes every single day and saw how they grew, and realized that in different constellations that the moon was standing in front of, they had a different growth characteristic. And she was able to do, I call it a star calendar, but basically it is a calendar sort of showing what, if you do something on a fruit day, when the moon is in Leo, that's a fruit time, fruit stuff works well. And this goes, and this impacts our whole lives. As the moon goes through the 12 constellations, and the sun goes through the 12 constellations, it just takes a year. But the moon, it takes a month. So she was able to realize that things did certain things at different times during this lunar, you know, through the signs of the zodiac type thing. And also, Alan Chadwick was very big on sowing your seeds at the right time. If you sow your seeds that are above ground seeds, you know, 3 to 4 days before the full moon, they will start germinating very quickly within 3 or 4 days. And the reason he said for that is as the moon is closer, it excites all water. So it excites the water in the soil, in the pond, the water in you. That's why people have a harder time to sleep when the moon's full, because the water's going in them. But that also wets the seed husks and then tells it the first day, it's like, oh, get up. Second day, it's like, oh, well, you should get up now. By the fourth day, it's like, come on, you got to go. It's time to germinate. And then the seed starts growing and it's off to the races. And it's really beneficial. We found it works amazing through what we do. So we always try and sow our seeds according to the phases of the moon. And for like longer germinating seeds, stuff like root crops, you would sow them on the new moon because they take a lot longer to germinate. But then by the time that force of the full moon has come again, they've wetted enough and they start growing. So that's kind of a key thing in having success in your garden, is if you can follow the cosmos, it will benefit you.
So this is the 2023 Maria Tune calendar. I don't know, $50 it costs or something like that.
I think it was 25.
25?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's even better.
Yeah,
So what's the day today? Anybody know?
the 18th.
18th of January. Oh, wrong page. Just got to the 15th. So the 18th today is a leaf day, and it's it would be a good time to plant lettuce even today.
Yeah. Well, today and the last couple days, because it was a leaf time, I was working because I haven't done it in years, with my asparagus, because it's a leaf crop. I was always like, oh, that patch is growing so good. I got to rip it out and divide it and spread it out a little bit more to get more asparagus. So I did it on these times. I did it early because they say you should do asparagus early as possible. Especially here, I found before I didn't lime, I just put compost on. But as soon as I started putting lime in, I started getting yields of asparagus, where before it just kind of grew. So just with our acid soil, just little tricks like that make a huge amount of difference. So
back to Maria Tune, and maybe there's another story. Like the people that started this out, and I've been an activist a long time in my own life, right? But I see them as they're the ones that started out, got you going, right? One group of people, a couple of ladies lived in Long Island, New York, and this was probably in the 40s. The local Long Island guys, they wanted to spray herbicides around so they didn't have to cut the weeds and things like that. These two ladies, they took them to court and they won. I mean, it's the first environmental significant thing ever happened in North America. And it was a biodynamic growers that were doing it. I mean, they got that much love for what the earth is able to do, and that we just got to be part of it and fit into it. So, I'm getting old. I got memory, and Louis can really do a lot of it. And Jacqueline, do you have something that you think it'd be worth saying?
A lot of the biodynamic thing,
Thank you. All right. I'm quite impressed with the biodynamic work that Gary and Louis do. I'm sort of just the cheerleader, and I go to them and I say, okay, so what should I be planting today? And they tell me, and I do that, which is wonderful. But I will remind everybody here that we have a 50-year-old plus group in the Valley called the Mount Klitza Garden Club. which is a huge group of people who have much experience. Now, you might say, well, what does that have to do with food? Because many people in that club are extremely good gardeners with flowers. But you have to realize that flowers are bee food. So if you never put a flower in a bouquet, wouldn't matter as long as you grow them. You are doing a wonderful thing for all of the bees and many of the other flying insects that depend upon flowers. And the other thing is that people in the Mount Klitza Garden Club, they also grow a lot of vegetables. So if you are new in the valley and you want to rub shoulders with people who have been growing for years and years around here, go and become a member of the Mount Klitza Garden Club. Their meetings are the first Thursday night of the month at Echo Center. And it just happens that the first Thursday in February, I'm going to be talking about how to save seeds and how to do it in a really easy way, like the easiest way to save seeds with doing the least amount of work is sort of my topic. So just in case that interests you, I'm mentioning it now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and my mother has a really good point that growing a vegetable garden, growing flowers is very important to help bring in star power from the insects and for you. It brings in a lot. I always tell people who start out, just buy some daffodil bulbs, buy some different bulbs, plant them, and when they come up, you'll be so thrilled that they came up and you didn't waste your money. You'll want to buy more.
So, you know, I like I said, I don't remember a lot of things so much anymore. But if Louis has got something more he wants to say, or if you have any questions, we're willing to try and handle some. So
Yeah, and like I said, we're open on Tuesdays at our farm for produce sales and those sort of things. But also come on out, you know, have a chat with us. If you want to get some stinging nettle, I'll give you some. I got wax of it. So and no problem like that. And yarrow and those sort of things are comfy to get you started. There's no, you know, expense there. Once you get these things going, they sort of grow like crazy. I actually found some in French Creek over there, but I didn't find any around here. Yeah, I just didn't. Yeah. That's where I was in French Creek, and I've purposely tried to get them going out in the forest in different places, guerrilla gardening. Maybe you shouldn't, but hey, I want to do it. Yeah.
Now, many of you know that last season was a strange year in the garden. Are there any general questions for our panel this evening? Yes. All right. Yes. Yeah. Yes, one of the predictions certainly is a marked increase in frost-free days, obviously enough. At the moment, I think we have about 190, and the possibility is that it could be going up to as much as 250, perhaps by 2050 or beyond. So to that extent, there's some positives. The negatives, of course, probably accompanied by longer periods of drought and low rainfall, which will have the disadvantage of those of us in the city, depending upon city water. Conceivable that will be costing a lot more in the future. Question over here.
I've done some rainwater harvesting and I helped Heather install a rainwater tank and I hope it worked. Good, good, good. And on our farm, we were just able, because we're on a mountain, we were able to upgrade our dugout to make it about, half as, almost not quite double, but a quarter more than it was. So we're doing that in hopes, but I mean, it's always, that's a real problem. That's where anytime you can add more compost and more fertility to your ground, you're going to have a better water holding capability. And so that's going to mean that your water is going to go a lot further. Also, the How to Grow More Vegetables book is really good on their close planting, in that the crops are planted close together so that it makes a canopy that conserves the moisture. And it's a really excellent book on that sort of stuff. But that is going to be the number one problem, is that we're going to have to really, you just have to play it by ear. But as quick as you can get your crops growing and going good, and more humus is going to make a big difference, and harvest all the water you can.
Just in water, irrigation and all that stuff. Water is really a limiting factor in the Alberni Valley for sustainable agriculture. It is anywhere, but with our really hot summers, if you don't have a water source that you can, maintain the health of your plants, you're going to have disappointing results. We have, I've been using a drip irrigation and, on timers. So the whole garden is pretty much on drip. I have some mini micro spray on some plants that prefer that. But that drip tape, if you guys are familiar with that, you'd buy it in a big roll and then run it with timers. And you can basically, with timers with zones, you can, get an irrigation regime or watering regime for the different types of plants that you have. What Louis said about organics in your soil is really important. I grew up on a farm in Manitoba. We moved to BC when I was 16. But we grew up near a little town called Newdale. And the famous Newdale clay loam was actually named as a provincial soil there a few years ago. I remember my mom grew up in that area, and she told me that during the Depression, they never had a crop failure. They couldn't get any money for their crops, but they never had a crop failure. So that Newdale clay loam had traditionally had an organic content of over 14%. With modern farming methods, it's down around 5 or 6. So I don't think they'd do as well in a drought as they did back when my mom was a little girl. But it's really important to build up your organics. Outside of the irrigation, that's probably one of the most important things to do to ensure yourself that you can actually garden sustainably. You can't really replace what humus does for you with chemicals or, man-made amendments. There's lots of gains to be made with careful management of water.
In my own particular case, I started my soil was very challenging, heavy clay, and so I've been gardening on that particular spot now for over 30 years, and I have to agree with Louis and Keith about building organics. I've been doing that. I plant a cover crop every fall and dig it in, and so when I started out, I had to water virtually daily in the summer. Now once a week probably is enough. And that is because building the organics and I plant very heavily. So like Louis said about the canopy covering the soil, those things alone. I'm very fortunate in that I live on a creek. I've got access to water. I don't have to worry about water. But at the same time, I don't think pouring water on your garden is such a great thing to do. If the less you do that, the better. The less you have to do it, the better, I guess. Okay.
Well, that does raise the question, though. Has anyone had any experience with diverting, say, their washing machine water to the garden or to a storage container? No. All right. Well, that's something to experiment with.
Well, and I would say again that too, I've recently started planting winter grains that grow through the fall. And I found with them, once they're up and growing through the winter and then growing, I don't have to water them. I just let them grow through, and then, you don't water them, you don't do anything. So winter wheats and winter oats and different things like that can really be a water savings. And also, if you just cut the seed heads off and thrush them, then you can till back in all the straw. So you're always amending the spot again, sort of thing. So timing makes a big difference.
So I want to, before we send you home with your cup of barrel compost, which is compost manure put into a half a barrel and then inoculated with the 6 compost preparations that Louis mentioned. So you just don't take a handful of that and put it and have it to do something. We want to get the maximum out of it. So you want to have some non-chlorinated water because it's a poison. The chlorination is there to make it not get bacteria in it and stuff like that. But we want to get humus and bacteria and stuff like that. So non-chlorinated water, handful of that into something, even a 5-gallon pail would be fine. You just have to put enough of the barrel glass. And we're going to give you a cup full. So that should do the 5 gallons, don't you think, Louis?
Yeah.
And then you got to stir it this way. And then you stop and you go that way. So you're making chaos and structure. Chaos and structure, and it fits up the water to be able to have it turns that handful of compost into the whole pail full of inoculum. And so then you're going to put that wherever you want to get humus or microbiology going in your work situation, your garden situation. It works. And, it takes a bit to, you're going to come out to the compost demonstration. We're going to send you home with a pail of compost. And you're going to use it in that way, not just compost in one thing. You're using it as a stir thing. You're inoculating the growth.
Well, like Steiner says, as you're stirring it, you are putting your intention in. So, and especially in gardening, intention is everything, but always I try and think about that in my life, what I'm and that's the whole positive thinking thing, but intention is everything.
So the community has to feed itself. So you better get started on it. It's time to start is tomorrow. So
we're all on our own personal gardening adventure. And all the things that, we talked about and shown, they started with an idea. Oh, what if I try growing quinoa? You think it would work? And that's how it starts. And then you start looking around and who's got the seed and who's experience that you can learn from. So I just I thought it would be fun to tell you that my little garden adventure this year is I'm going to try dryland rice. So dryland rice doesn't need to be grown in a paddy. It can be grown in normal garden soil conditions. And there's some experimentation been done in Canada with it, with some success. And it apparently equals or exceeds the production of some of our grain crops. So that's interesting. So I just wondered if anybody else has something that they want to try this year that's a little bit different and they're looking forward to it, something that's a little unusual that meets the sustainability criteria. I don't think we can grow avocados here yet, but anyway, does anybody else have any garden adventures they're planning?
Put on at the island egg, which is about growing avocado, lime, and I think the third. Thank you.
Yeah, that's already
Lemons.
On how to do that on the island, so I suspect they're probably a little further down the island than us. All things are changing.
Well, they also grow, oh, there's one man that grows bananas in the Yukon, but you'd have to ask why. Well, we've certainly been treated tonight to a lot of interesting expertise, wide variety of ideas, but most of all, and a tremendous amount of it's what seems to me to be encouragement to you all. I mean, it's pretty clear that some of the things we've taken for granted in the past are not going to be present in the future. Pretty clear that some of our perceptions of trade, the whole sort of neoliberal view of the world, may not be present in 5, 10, who knows how many years' time. So the importance of local economy, local resilience is something that's becoming very real. And certainly we have proponents here tonight that can give us a piece of that, or one aspect of what is a much larger issue and a larger concern. So I think it has been incredibly encouraging, but I'm also personally encouraged to see the numbers who've come out, because these 3 or 4 events we've held over the winter were difficult at times to promote and publicize. Perhaps they weren't close to people's heart. There was also a comedian somewhere in town. He was down at the pub. There's an event on at the Capitol. So there was a lot on tonight, a lot of people out, and I'm very pleased to see all of you who did take the time, and I hope that you found it as worthwhile as I have.
That'd be great.
You want one?